Hello everyone, this is Chase Pounds. I actually have my dinner, cat, green beans, fried catfish, and coleslaw. It's for my Sunday dinner, and as the last part of my Halloween segment, I'm going to be discussing about the folklore of werewolves. Now, some of you may not be familiar with this topic, but the origins of werewolves date, or I should say predate, going back all the way to ancient times. To most people, you think that werewolves is something that's been more modernly been concocted in film in Hollywood, but that's not really the case. There's stories, tales, legends of werewolves that go all the way back to ancient Greece, ancient Rome. Pretty much any part of the world, you can find a story or a similar story that has elements of werewolf folklore. And some may not be exact stories of werewolves, such as some may be of different people transforming, but it has the same concept of transforming into another animal, or a human to an animal. Such as in Japan, there's wild cats. Other places, there's reindeer, opossums. Of course, in Greece, it's the story of the minotaur stags, half man, half bull. That's a kind of example, I guess, of the transformation of, like, may be considered werewolf or early werewolf folklore. Some people may not consider werewolf folklore. And I kind of had prior knowledge of this mainly from documentaries I've seen, stuff around the internet, including part of my favorite documentary series, History's Mysteries, chronicles tales of werewolves going back to ancient times. And a lot of the classic myths surrounding the werewolves, I guess legend and folklore is the concept of full moon madness, that the moon creates havoc, creates chaos on Earth. And not really so much just along with werewolf folklore, but also cases associated with full moon madness is hiding crime, as well as earthquakes have been associated with the full moon. I guess another, supernatural folklores, I guess, with vampires, or what would be vampires or ghosts, or so forth. Often many fairy tales, such as fairy tales you may have been told as a kid, or read to a nursery rhyme, or I should say many of the classic fairy tales you would probably read as a kid, such as Little Red Riding Hood, Three Little Pigs, The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Well, to some people, I guess scholars or paranormal researchers would say that that contains elements of werewolf folklore, which I somewhat disagree, but to some, I guess it has connection or association with werewolves folklore, such as they make a point by saying that in Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf tries to dress up as a human, the wolf talks to the girl, so that kind of has like human qualities to it. So I guess that gives the association with being the wolf as being a human, and I guess maybe at one point he was a human, but then I guess he was reincarnated or transformed into a wolf of some sort. But I disagree with Little Red Riding Hood being a werewolf story, or the Three Little Pigs, or any of those. But though variations have changed and some have added werewolves to it, but I wouldn't think of it as a classic werewolf story. The belief in werewolves was mostly prevalent during the Middle Ages, during the height of the Inquisition, the Reformation period, where at the time when, which I also had prior knowledge of this as well, that often peasants, mostly women, were burned at the stake or executed for being witches. In some cases in France, in some rare cases in France, you had people who were condemned, particularly men who were condemned, executed for being suspected of being werewolves, which isn't really the case. It was actually a medical condition that there have been several theories about what of the cases of people who've been suspected of werewolves during the 16th and 17th centuries was mainly because of unknown medical diseases such as lycanthropy, which is actually a case where people actually believe that they can transform into a wolf, which also further perpetuates the werewolf myths. It's also been myths, but at the time, most people believed that werewolfism was a form of a pact with the devil or a form of demonic possession, which some people also often believe that using the power of the devil and possession is a real phenomenon, and the performance of exorcism casts out the demons. It's actually a true incident that happened here in my own hometown, St. Louis, where the Antonia Election Brothers Hospital exorcism was performed on a boy, a 14-year-old boy. And this becomes inspiration for the 1973 film class, The Exorcist. And it actually was on the news and on Ricky Smiley that it was voted one of the most scariest movies of all time, which I kind of agree it was a movie that changed the horror genre. But at the time, people didn't have an understanding of medical science and the reasoning, and which led to fears and falsely accusations of people being put to death of being werewolves and witches. As I said, there's always been different theories and speculations. As I said, lycanthropy. Another was hypertrichosis, or where it's like a rare hair disease where it grows all over the body. It makes the person look very hairy, and some people it may make you look like an animal or a werewolf or wolfman. A lot of times, people who had this medical condition will often you would classically see who have jobs in the sideshow or circus business, the freak shows they used to be called at the time. And sometimes they would be called the wolf man, the wolf woman, which kind of eerily, I think, comes to inspiration for a lot of the early werewolf films. There's actually paintings of a aristocratic family who was known to have the known disease. Both the father, the young daughter, and the young boy had this hypertrichosis. And a lot of people say it looks very similar to the Universal horror movie makeup using the first werewolf early werewolf film, the Wolfman film. Other explanations range from which this is particularly what I'm familiar with, is some bread or a fungus known as ergot got into the bread supply, the crops, and caused supposedly some LSD hallucination, and made people believe that they were seeing witches. At the same time, made men think they were seeing or thinking that they were a werewolf, which is kind of similar to I guess a kind of similar explanation as I mentioned before in my last video on zombies, about how pufferfish is responsible for putting people in the almost zombie-like or coma-like state. Excuse me. And it's just interesting how that these medical conditions kind of correlate with folklore. And then there was other diseases, other theories such as porphyria or porphyria, I think it was, or cases of feral children being left in the wild, also further perpetuate werewolf stereotypes and myths of people who were thought to be alone, thought to be isolated, rugged, or what you consider a hermit, a recluse, as being associated with werewolfism. There's also how poor peasant people who lived alone were often the victims of being put to death of witchcraft and werewolfism. Such classic cases of during the Middle Ages of the werewolf trials was Gilles Gagne, who attacked the girl and believed that the wolf was actually a human, and then he was violently tortured and pressed into a confession, and of course was burned at the stake for being a werewolf, which wasn't the case. Other cases, and more other known case that kind of changed the era, that kind of changed the mindset of people from believing in the supernatural to a more scientific, more enlightened way of reasoning, was a case of a boy in France. I think his name was Grenier, who he was known to attack women and girls, suspecting women and girls based on a women and girls after he had gotten a this magic wolf, supposed magic wolf pill that he got from a stranger, which people believe was an evil spirit or the devil, and it gave him powers to make him turn to a wolf. But people have but when he was being tried for his, about to be executed for his crimes, a sincere or I should say a more forgiving lawyer thought that he was being affected by a medical issue of his brain and not actually a werewolf. And that made people stop and think that he may not be a werewolf and that he may be suffering from a medical condition. So instead of having burned at the stake, he was sent to a monastery. But unfortunately, he passed away. Unfortunately, as his health deteriorated. And it's stories like those that I guess often been associated with werewolf myths and folklore, even though werewolves technically don't exist. it was just people's lack of understanding of scientific medical conditions that led to perpetuating fears of the supernatural. That were based on perpetuated fears of the supernatural. Not only was this a time where people believed in witchcraft, it was also an era where people believed in vampires as well, which was also thought to be explained by natural causes or medical causes. The werewolf folklore will still continue to will continue to fascinate, I guess, people, the public, mainstream culture, well into the 20th century. It's by then that they start doing films about the werewolf or werewolves. Of course, well, the most notable film. Well, there have also been books based on like short stories on werewolves as well, going back to the 1840s with Wagner the Werewolf, which was a news strip, what was known as penny dreadfuls. Then the first publication of a book was called The Werewolf of Paris, which turned to a film, which was supposedly based on the case of a soldier who was known to wander the graves and unfortunately cannibalize his victims. You probably wonder if I still have an appetite mentioning this, but he that traced him, I guess, based on what I heard on mysteries that traced him to being a werewolf, and that became the inspiration for the film The Werewolf of London. Instead of being called The Werewolf of Paris, it was called The Werewolf of London, so it could appeal to more English-speaking audience. And the film was not a success, but it didn't become as successful as in the 1940s. 41, The Wolfman, starring Lon Chaney Jr., the more infamous Lon Chaney Jr., and the more recognized film, werewolf film. And for the first time, it introduced a lot of the new, the more modern Hollywood werewolf folklore, such as, even though the full moon has been around since, as I mentioned, since ancient times, but it introduced the pentagram, the silver bullet, and the new concept: if you've been bitten by a werewolf, you become a werewolf, which to many paranormal experts and werewolf historians say that that's never been considered the true, authentic way of becoming a werewolf. It was usually either by a curse, a potion, or the cold curse of repulsion. That's simply being bitten by a werewolf, which I think may have been inspired by vampire folklore from Bram Stoker's Dracula. That if you become a vampire, if you be bitten by a vampire, you become a vampire yourself. And then that may inspire, as I said before, my zombie video, that inspired the concept of zombie folklore. If you are bitten by a modern zombie folklore, if you've been bitten by a zombie, you become a zombie yourself. So I guess it just inspired changed the whole horror concept. And with the success of the Wolfman film, there's been several more werewolf films that will come out and forever change the werewolf saga and the folklore to a kind of household known movie monster. And then that's kind of pretty much sums up the werewolf werewolf video. This is another video by Chase Pounds. Happy Halloween.